They pulled into the driveway like they still owned the place. Suitcases, lawn chairs, even assigned rooms. But I stood on the porch holding the deed. I gave them exactly 24 hours to pack up and leave. Hi, I'm Lauren. I was the daughter they forgot to include for nearly a decade, until they tried to sell the one place that ever felt like home, behind my back. But what they didn't know was that Grandma left me something stronger than inheritance. She left me a plan. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now let's start the story together. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee when the subject line caught my eye. I almost missed it. Another buzz in an endless stream of updates, flagged messages, project reviews, and end-of-quarter reports. But this one was different. It read, RSVP, Harav Family Lakeside Retreat. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. For a moment, I wasn't in my office anymore. I was 12 again, standing barefoot on the dock next to Grandma Maggie, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as we watched the sun disappear behind the lake. I clicked the email. It wasn't addressed to me. It had been forwarded accidentally from my cousin Pete to someone named Sarah. The body of the message included a list. Confirmed guests: Mom, Dad, Tessa, Logan, Uncle Jim, Aunt Carol, Sarah, Pete, the kids. My name wasn't there. I reread it twice. Maybe I missed a line. Maybe I was hidden in the Ann family. But no, there it was. Every branch of the Chen family tree, carefully noted and accounted for. Everyone, except me. For a moment, I couldn't move. The soft hum of the HVAC, the quiet tap of distant keyboards from the outer hallway, all of it seemed to fall away. I turned my chair slowly toward the window. Sunlight poured in through the glass, warming the wood floor and the single-framed photograph on my desk. Grandma Maggie and me, arms looped together, both of us grinning, our feet dangling off the edge of the dock. I hadn't been to the lake house in 9 years. I thought it was bad timing at first, board meetings, business travel. But year after year, the reunions somehow always landed on the third week of June or the last weekend of August, like clockwork. And somehow, no one ever thought to ask about my schedule. My phone buzzed again. A real estate alert I forgot I'd set months ago. The headline read, Charming Lakeside Property, Historic Brick Colonial, Motivated Seller. I tapped the listing, and the photos loaded in slow, aching waves. The wraparound porch, the worn red bricks, the window seat where I used to read Nancy Drew for hours, the fireplace where we all opened presents on Christmas mornings before I started getting, your gift will be mailed this year emails. My throat tightened as I opened the county website. I typed in the address from memory, like reciting a phone number from a past life. It took a moment to load, but when it did, the number was impossible to miss. $27,965 in unpaid property taxes. 3 years' worth. 3 years during which I'd sent them quarterly checks. Checks with Lake House Maintenance, written clearly in the memo line. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lighting buzzed softly. It wasn't a scream, not even a cry, but the hum had a weight to it. Something settled heavily in my chest. They cashed those checks. They let the taxes lapse. And now they were selling it, without saying a word. A memory slipped through the static. I was 16, standing on a high school auditorium stage with my economics trophy clutched in both hands. I'd won first place in the national competition. My name had been called. Applause filled the room. No one from my family was in the audience. They'd gone to Logan's swim meet instead. He placed fourth. I remember standing there, still smiling for the camera, while the school counselor snapped a photo with her old Nikon. "Proud of you," she said. But it wasn't the same. Back in the present, I closed the real estate listing and opened my portfolio tracker. The numbers glowed, steady and confident across the screen. Yes, I could afford it. More than that, I could outbid anyone else who tried. But the thought wasn't satisfying. Not yet. Buying the lake house wouldn't undo the 9 years of silence, of invisible invitations and cropped photos. It wouldn't change the way I was made to feel, like a guest in my own history. Still, it was a start. I reached for the intercom. "Julia?" I said, my voice calm but flat. "Cancel all my meetings for the day." There was a slight pause on the other end. "All of them?" "Yes," I said. "Reschedule whatever you can. I need the afternoon." "Of course, Ms. Chen. Should I hold your 4:30 with the Thompson Group?" "Number clear it." I ended the call and pulled up my contacts. The name was already there. Thomas Phelps, legal counsel. He was the man who handled my contracts, my startup buyout last year, the estate paperwork for Grandma Maggie. Steady, discreet, sharp. I pressed the call icon. "Mr. Phelps speaking." "It's Lauren Chen, Miss Chen," he said, his tone instantly alert. "What can I help you with?" "I need you to review a trust document," I said. "Today." A pause. "Certainly. When can you come in?" I glanced at the lake house listing again. "Give me an hour." I ended the call and stood slowly. My leather chair creaked behind me. My blazer slid from the hook by the window. I folded the photo frame and slipped it gently into my bag. As I walked out of the office, my heels tapping against polished floors, I heard myself whisper something I hadn't planned. They excluded me for 9 years. Another step. Another breath. Let's see how they handle being the ones left out. The door to the storage unit rolled up with a low groan, and the scent hit me before the light did. It was the same air I remembered from summer afternoons in the attic. Dust, cardboard, and something faintly sweet, like cedar and old lake wind sealed in time. My steps echoed as I entered, the soles of my flats tapping against the smooth concrete. Rows of labeled boxes stretched along both sides like sentries, each one marked in the careful, looping script I knew by heart. Holiday ornaments, family photos, old quilts, clean. My grandmother had cataloged her life with the same quiet precision she'd used to prune her roses, gently but with purpose. The temperature was cool inside, climate-controlled, exactly as she'd planned. She'd arranged for this space years before her passing, just as she'd prepaid for her own cremation and chosen the flowers for her memorial. Lilacs because they bloom boldly and vanish quickly. I knelt beside a stack labeled Letters and Personal Files. My fingers trailed along the side of the box, brushing the slight ridges of her pen strokes beneath the packing tape. I pulled the box forward, heart steady but heavy. And there it was, tucked between 2 accordion folders, wrapped in plastic sleeve, edges slightly curled from age. A large manila envelope. On the front, in familiar ink, "For Lauren when the time comes." The E in my name was shaped just like hers, a habit I'd picked up unknowingly in middle school and never unlearned. I lifted it gently, half expecting the paper to crumble, but it was still firm, whole, just waiting. The weight in my hand was disproportionate to its size. I didn't open it right away. I sat with it for a while, legs folded beneath me on the cold concrete, back resting against a box of Thanksgiving linens. I traced each word with my thumb like they were Braille, and I'd gone blind to the truth. Her voice came to me then, not a memory, not quite a ghost, just a sense of her, settling next to me like she used to, the hem of her sweater brushing my arm. This house should bring joy, not debt and silence. I broke the seal. Inside were 2 things, a handwritten letter, folded neatly in thirds, and a set of legal papers clipped at the corner with a gold fastener. The smell of ink and paper, of time, rose to meet me. Her handwriting hadn't changed, slanted, careful, a little smaller toward the end of each line. My Lauren, if you're reading this, then things have unfolded just as I feared and just as I prepared for. Love doesn't always come from those who raise us. Sometimes it comes in silence, in watching, in protecting, without being seen. This house was meant to give you peace, not remind you of what they refuse to see in you. Use this when the silence becomes unbearable. Reclaim what they'll never give you willingly. Love always, Maggie. I didn't realize I'd started crying until I noticed the wet thumbprint on the bottom corner of the page. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. Then I turned to the legal document. It was a formal trust agreement, dated 7 years ago. My name was listed as a secondary beneficiary of the lake house, with a clause that read in plain, brutal legalese: in the event that primary beneficiaries fail to maintain property tax obligations for a period exceeding 2 years, all rights and title shall transfer to the secondary beneficiary, Lauren Elaine Chen. 2 years. They were 3 years delinquent. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve and stood. There was no question what needed to happen next. It took 12 minutes to reach Mr. Phelps' office. Downtown traffic was light and the radio stayed off. I needed the silence more than the noise. He greeted me at the front desk himself, gray suit crisp, glasses perched at the bridge of his nose like always. "Miss Chen," he said, stepping aside. "Come on in." I placed the envelope on the polished wood of his desk and sat across from him without speaking. He opened it with the care of a man who had handled too many messy family legacies and knew a clean one when he saw it. His eyes moved quickly over the pages. "This clause is ironclad," he said. "Your grandmother left no room for ambiguity. Can it be contested? By anyone else in the family?" He shook his head. "Only if they can prove she was mentally unfit, coerced, or unaware of the document's contents. And based on the language here, she was none of the above." He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "She knew what she was doing." I nodded once. "Can we move forward?" "We can initiate immediate transfer into a trust of your naming," he said. "Do you have one?" I hesitated. "Harrove Trust. That's what she would have called it." He smiled faintly. "Very well." Phelps picked up the phone and began issuing instructions. I sat quietly, eyes on the framed artwork above his desk, an old watercolor of a boat dock at dusk. It looked eerily like ours, the same stillness in the water, the same promise of departure or return. Julia called just as we finished signing the preliminary documents. "I've canceled your remaining meetings and sent your standard notice of unavailability," she said. "Should I book you a car for tomorrow morning?" "No," I said. "I'm not ready to go back to the lake just yet." "Well, let me know when. And Lauren..." "Yeah? I'm proud of you for doing this." Her voice caught me off guard. I blinked hard, not trusting myself to answer, then ended the call with a quiet, "Thanks." Phelps handed me a copy of the signed paperwork. "We can close by next Friday," he said, "which, if I'm not mistaken, is 1 week before the scheduled reunion." I looked down at the line where my name was printed in bold legal type, Lauren Elaine Chen, trustee. "Perfect," I said, slipping the document into my bag. "Let's not rush to tell them." The key turned stiffly in the lock, as if the house itself was resisting me. The front door creaked open and I stepped inside, greeted by stillness and the faint scent of mildew, the kind of smell that clung to vacation homes left to their own devices, old upholstery, forgotten wood polish, and lake air trapped between decades of memory. I didn't expect the wave that hit me. It wasn't nostalgia, it was weight, familiar and unwanted. The hallway floor groaned beneath my steps. A spider web stretched lazily across the corner of the archway, trembling slightly with the change in air. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The ceiling lower, the hallway narrower. Or maybe I just stopped shrinking myself to fit. I moved past the kitchen, running my hand along the chipped counter. Grandma's copper kettle still sat on the back burner. She'd insisted it whistled better than anything modern. I didn't dare touch it. The living room came next. Dust lay thick on the windowsills. One of the curtain rods sagged. A crack snaked across the glass of the old photo frame above the mantel. It still held the 1998 Christmas portrait, the whole family, including me, standing dead center. Before things shifted, before I became the afterthought, I turned down the hallway to what used to be the kids' bedrooms. Mine was the smallest, but I'd loved it fiercely. It had a bay window, soft yellow walls, and a creaky closet door that stuck in the summer. Now the room held cardboard boxes stacked too high, each labeled in thick black marker. Lauren's junk, Dell's old books, stuff, attic? I opened the top box. On top was my old graduation quilt, the one Grandma Maggie had stitched by hand. The fabric was stained, gray smears across the pale blues and sunflowers. Paint. Someone had used it as a drop cloth. I didn't cry. I just folded it carefully like she taught me and set it aside. "Anne," I called, raising my voice just enough. "Can you grab me the inspection list?" The property manager, a spry woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, appeared in the doorway holding a clipboard. "You'll want to start with the roof and the electrical," she said, flipping a page. "There's some water damage above the kitchen, and the deck out back is barely holding." "How long has it been like this?" She hesitated. "Honestly, a while. There were always excuses. Logan was supposed to handle the upkeep. Never saw much progress." "Got it." I pulled out my phone. "Julia, we're a go. Call every contractor who owes you a favor." She laughed gently on the other end. "Already on it. East Wing first?" "Exactly. That's where they'll want to sleep." I could almost hear her smirk. "And do we want them comfortable?" "Comfortable enough to feel what it means to stay as guests." Within an hour, the house came alive with noise. Trucks pulled into the gravel drive. Work boots thudded on the porch. Ladders clanged against the side of the house. I watched from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, as one electrician traced the fuse box with a shake of his head. "This hasn't been touched in at least a decade," he muttered. Julia arrived in a flurry of movement, her clipboard already marked with notes, floor plans rolled under one arm. "You weren't exaggerating," she said, looking around. "Would I ever?" I replied, offering her a fresh coffee from the thermos I'd brought from town. She sipped and made a noise of approval. Then she handed me a folder. "I brought what you asked for, photos, family documents, and this." She pulled out a photo album, one I hadn't seen in years, uncropped. I turned the pages slowly. There I was in every picture, centered, smiling, included, before things shifted, before they trimmed me out to make more room for their curated version of love. I didn't stop on every page, just enough to remember what it felt like to be visible. Back in the hallway, I opened the closet and found a dusty bag of summer crafts, shells, beads, thread, and at the bottom, wrapped in an old towel, the wind chime kit. We'd made it together one summer, Grandma Maggie and I. She called it our storm string. She said it would sing after the rain, reminding us we'd come through it. I carried it out to the porch. The nails were still there. I replaced the frayed fishing line with new cord from Julia's supply bag, each shell threaded with care, each bead slid into place like it had been waiting. When I was done, I stepped back. The wind moved gently and the chime answered, light and high and honest. Anne returned just before dusk with the updated reservation list. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes carried a trace of something. Pity, maybe, or caution. "I thought you should see this." I read the list. Richard and Elaine, master bedroom Tessa and her family, East Wing Logan, East Wing guests, AD, West Wing staff, basement room, Lauren, not listed. "Of course," I murmured. My fingers hovered over the guest log screen. Then, deliberately, I updated each name. Richard Chen, guest Elaine Chen, guest Tessa Harding, guest Logan Chen, guest Lauren Chen, owner, Harrove Trust, LLC. Anne watched, but didn't comment. Instead, she handed me the keys. "Would you like me to stay through the reunion?" "Yes," I said, "but not as staff." "As oversight." She nodded. Understood. Just as she turned to go, the wind chime sang again. And then, gravel. The crunch of tires. 3 SUVs coming up the drive. Early. Of course they were early. I didn't flinch. Julia appeared at my side, scanning the vehicles. "Want me to answer the door?" "No." I said, smoothing the front of my sweater. Let them knock. She raised an eyebrow. But not like before. 3 SUVs crawled up the gravel driveway like they still owned the place. I watched from behind the sheer curtain in the entryway, hands loose at my sides, heart steady. The lake wind had picked up just enough to set the seashell chime whispering behind me. Light filtered through the stained glass window over the front door, laying soft colors across the floorboards. The same boards I had cleaned myself last week, on my knees, scrubbing away years of their indifference. First out was Dad, Richard, still in his golf shirt and pressed khakis, even after a 6-hour drive. He looked around like he expected someone to come out and take his bags. Elaine followed, her wide-brimmed hat shielding her from a sun that wasn't even shining. She called back to Tessa, who was wrangling luggage and 3 kids from the back of her Suburban. No one looked up at the porch. They didn't expect to be greeted. They expected to enter. Anne stepped forward from the corner of the porch, clipboard in hand, posture straight. "Good afternoon. May I have the name on the reservation, please?" Dad blinked at her like she'd spoken in a different language. "Excuse me?" "Your reservation," she repeated, polite but firm. "I'll need confirmation before I can allow entry." Elaine gave a small laugh. "Oh, no need for that. We're the owners." Anne glanced at her clipboard, then back at them. "I'm afraid that's not accurate." Richard took a slow step forward. "Look, I don't know what you think this is, but we've owned this house for over 30 years. My mother passed it down. And it changed ownership 3 weeks ago," Anne said, her tone level. "Hair of Trust, LLC now holds the deed. My staff and I are here on their behalf." Tessa, now hauling a large suitcase across the gravel, stopped short. "What do you mean changed ownership? Who's Harrow Trust?" Logan, stepping out of his own car, slammed the door shut. "This is a joke. Where's Lauren?" Right on cue, Julia walked out the side door, a folder in hand and an iPad under her arm. She looked crisp, unreadable, every inch the coordinator I'd hired her to be. "Afternoon," she said, offering the folder to Richard. "Here are the updated property records, transaction details, and current trust structure. You'll find everything in order." Elaine took the folder with shaking hands. Richard didn't even look at it. His eyes were fixed on the porch, on me, as I stepped forward and let the screen door click softly behind me. I didn't wear anything dramatic, just jeans, a navy sweater, and the small gold necklace Grandma Maggie had given me on my 21st birthday. Still, the moment I appeared, the air changed. The silence fell like fog. Tessa's jaw tightened. Logan muttered something under his breath. Elaine's voice cracked first. "Lauren?" I nodded once. "Hi." Dad shook his head slowly. "Is this some kind of setup?" "No," I said quietly. "This is a transfer, one you signed when you neglected the property taxes for 3 consecutive years." "That's ridiculous," Logan snapped. "You don't just lose property because of taxes." "You do, when there's a clause in the trust," I said. "One Grandma Maggie added long before she passed. It states that if the primary beneficiaries fail to maintain the home, including taxes, the house reverts to the secondary beneficiary." Richard's face darkened. "You mean you?" "Yes," I said. "I mean me." Elaine stepped forward. "But we used the money you sent. You can't seriously believe—" "I sent over $90,000 in 3 years, Mom." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And the county records show none of it went to taxes. The foundation is rotting. The roof was leaking over the fireplace. The electrical was a fire hazard." Tessa crossed her arms. "So what? You just swoop in and take it back? Without telling us?" "I followed the clause," I said. "I did what Grandma asked. She knew silence could only hold so long." The screen door clicked again. Sheriff Thompson stepped out onto the porch, hat in hand, eyes scanning the scene. "Afternoon," he said. "Everything going all right here?" Logan immediately bristled. "She's trying to keep us out of our own house." The sheriff glanced at me. I nodded. "I reviewed the documents yesterday," he said. "Ownership's legitimate. You're listed as guests, not proprietors. Any attempt to enter the home without permission from the owner would be considered trespassing. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Elaine's voice was almost a whisper. "Lauren, you did this? To us?" I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "No, you did this. I just stopped pretending it didn't matter." Wind swept across the porch. The curtain inside fluttered. Behind me, the wind chime let out a soft, clear note. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just clear. "You have 24 hours, I said. "You can stay as guests, follow the house rules, or you can leave." Richard looked like he might argue, but Logan stopped him with a hand on the shoulder. Julia handed Anne a copy of the updated guest list. Anne stepped down to meet them at the base of the steps. "I'll show you to your assigned rooms," she said simply. No one moved. Sheriff Thompson tipped his hat. "I'll be nearby if you need me." As he turned to go, I heard Dad mutter something to Logan. She always had a way of twisting things to look like the victim. But this time, I didn't twist. I didn't plead. I didn't offer explanation. I simply turned back toward the door, letting it swing shut behind me. They thought I'd destroyed the past. What I did was quieter than that. I kept the pieces they tried to erase. The evening light slanted through the windows, casting long golden bars across the hardwood floor. The smell of lemon oil still lingered from Julia's late afternoon polishing. Outside, the lake lay flat, mirroring a pale blue sky. Inside, no one spoke. Richard and Elaine sat stiffly on the living room couch. Tessa perched on the armrest, her phone dark for once. Logan hadn't come downstairs. The others, cousins, spouses, hovered in the doorway, reluctant to enter a room they used to fill without hesitation. I stood by the fireplace, the album open in my hands. "This was 1996, I said, lifting the first photo from its sleeve. "My 8th birthday. Grandma made the cake herself. Yellow frosting, too much glitter. I was front and center." I turned the page. "Here's 1997. I'm at the edge." Flip. 1998. Cropped out. I laid the photos on the coffee table one by one. Proof not of presence, but of removal. The way the frame narrowed each year, as if I were taking up too much space. Elaine shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't mean to—" "You didn't forget," I interrupted. "You edited." Silence. Julia stepped forward and placed a manila folder beside the photos. I opened it and began to spread out printed email threads, lines highlighted in yellow. "Plan around Lauren's Q3 board meeting," I read aloud. "She'll never make it that week." I looked up. "That was from Pete, 2020. You all agreed." Richard frowned. "These are private family messages." "No," I said. "They're evidence of pattern, deliberate exclusion. You didn't leave me out by accident. You coordinated it." Next, Julia passed me the spreadsheet. I projected it on the TV screen using her tablet. The bank records glowed under the dimmed lights. "Here," I said, pointing. "Every check I sent, labeled Lake House Maintenance, deposited within 3 days. And here, withdrawals into a personal account. Dad, that's your signature." Elaine inhaled sharply. Richard said nothing. I continued. "Grandma left a clause in her trust. If the house wasn't cared for, if taxes were unpaid for more than 2 years, it passed to the secondary beneficiary. That's me. You triggered the clause. I followed it." From the coffee table, I picked up the original trust document and unfolded it. "Mr. Phelps is on video if you'd like legal confirmation," I added. The screen flickered to life. Mr. Phelps, looking composed as always, greeted the room. "Everything Miss Chen has said is accurate," he said. "The house legally belongs to Harrove Trust, LLC. Any contestation will be dismissed with prejudice. The documentation is clear." Tessa scoffed quietly. "You planned all this." "Every moment I planned," I said, "after 9 years of watching you plan without me." Elaine reached for one of the photos. Her fingers hesitated over the image, then fell back. "You were always so independent," she murmured. "We thought you'd be fine." "You needed the money," I said. "You said that already." "It was never personal," Richard added, voice low. I stared at him. "Erasing someone," I said, "is always personal." I walked to the dining room wall and unwrapped a corkboard. I pinned it up with steady hands, placing printed cards beneath the heading, House Rules. One by one, I read them aloud. Guests only, mutual respect, no ownership claims, family therapy offered, optional but encouraged. Tessa crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." Elaine looked like she might cry. Richard's jaw tightened, but no one raised their voice. No shouting, no accusations, just facts, arranged neatly in rows like the restoration work still underway upstairs. I turned back toward the lake-facing windows. The last light of the day slipped over the water, catching on the edges of the wind chime. Its gentle melody danced through the screen door. Elaine's voice broke the silence. "You're still giving us space?" I nodded slowly. "Grandma would have wanted healing." I looked back at the board, but that comes with boundaries. The lake still looked the same quiet ripples breaking the surface, same morning mist stretching low across the water. But this time, I wasn't watching it from the sidelines. I was on the porch, mug in hand, toes bare against the warm boards. I was home. The wind chime sang softly with the breeze. It always caught the first light just right. Tiny reflections dancing across the railing like shy applause. Behind me, the house stirred, not with tension, not with expectations, but with purpose. Julia's voice drifted in through the screen door, reminding someone about the gluten-free muffins and the yoga mats. Laughter followed, not mine, yet, but a kind I recognized now. The kind that came after surviving something you didn't think you would. It had been a year since I stood on this same porch and told the people who once called me invisible that they were welcome, but no longer entitled. Now, the lake house had a new name, Harrove Haven, a registered nonprofit retreat space. We held small groups here, mostly women, sometimes mothers and daughters, sometimes sisters who hadn't spoken in a decade. They came with stories carried in their shoulders and left a little lighter. Healing wasn't a grand gesture. It was Sunday morning coffee. It was silence that didn't ache. It was one photo on the wall that stayed unedited. Inside, in the main hallway, that photo now hung in a simple white frame. Me, age 10, sitting beside Grandma Maggie, our heads tilted together in the shade of the dock. Elaine had sent it a few months ago, uncropped. The text had read, "Thinking of you today. Love, Mom." A part of me hadn't known how to respond, but I'd smiled anyway. They had visited once, my parents. Quietly, no bags, no assumptions, just them, for one afternoon in March. We'd walked the path by the water, not much was said. But when they left, Mom hugged me longer than expected. A month later, Dad mailed a letter. 3 pages, all in his careful, small handwriting. It sat framed on the wall next to the photo. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but truth. And maybe that was enough. Logan never came back. His absence, once sharp, had dulled into something simpler. A blank page I'd stopped trying to fill. Children's laughter echoed from the shoreline. A group of cousins, Sarah's kids, ran barefoot through the shallows. I called out, "Watch the slick rocks," and heard a chorus of, "Yes, Miss Lauren," in return. Some of them had started calling me Aunt Lauren again. By the garden gate, I saw Julia arranging folding chairs beneath the maple tree. Mr. Phelps strolled in from the driveway holding a brown paper bag. "Bagels," he called, "still warm." "You're spoiling us," I said. "Eleanor spoiled me first," he said with a wink, setting the bag down. "Just trying to pay it forward." We sat up together, hands moving with practiced ease. The breeze picked up again, sending the shells above us into song. I turned and looked at the brass plaque now mounted beside the door. The letters glinted in the sun. Harrove Haven. where healing happens not bold, not loud, just clear. Later that afternoon, I sat with a new group around the long oak table. I told them about the seashell wind chimes, how Grandma Maggie said they only sound their best after a storm. I handed each woman a small kit, string, shells, beads. Some smiled, some teared up. Some just held the materials without speaking. Healing looked different for everyone. As the group settled into their work, I slipped back onto the porch. The second chair, the one Grandma always left empty, was waiting. I lowered myself into it slowly, the wood creaking familiarly beneath me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. The wind rose again and the wind chime answered. "I finally came home," I whispered. The lake hasn't changed much, but I have. Sitting in the chair Grandma once left empty, I finally understand what she meant when she said some things are meant to weather storms. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people closest to us. But healing doesn't always mean going back. It means stepping forward with clarity, setting boundaries not to punish, but to protect peace. And maybe, just maybe, love finds its way again when we stop chasing approval and start honoring our worth. If this story reminded you of a moment you reclaimed your voice or wished you had, I'd be honored to hear it. Take a moment. Share your thoughts. We're never too old to build a new kind of family.